Hello everyone, Mason here. How are you doing? Today I'm reviewing The 100-Year-Old Man Who Climbed Out of the Window and Disappeared by Jonas Jonasson. Yeah, that's the longest title I've ever heard too. This was originally published in 2009 in Swedish and later translated into English. I, of course, listened to the Audible version, narrated by Peter Kenny. I totally intended to get in here and start recording a little bit earlier than I actually have, but I got sucked in and spent hours watching other people's content this morning. But I'm here now with my ice water because it's just getting uncomfortably hot. Yeah, I know, it's not that hot. Anyone who lives in the UK right now knows that it's getting a little bit warmer, but honestly, once it gets over 15 degrees, I start getting uncomfortable. But yeah, I'm here now, and I've got about an hour before I need to start getting ready, because I'm going out today for a nice meal with a friend that I haven't seen enough of recently. This is going to be a bit more of an informal review than others that I've done. I wanted to try doing something a little bit different. I know that I can't really do reading vlogs, especially considering that I don't appear on camera, but I thought that this would be a fun way to try doing things. So I started listening to this book last night, and it's just over 10 hours, and I now have 6.5 hours left. It is a really weird book, and I don't mean that in a bad way, it's just not like anything that I've read before, and it's totally not what I was expecting. I thought from the title that it was just going to be a story, a nice, simple story about an old man that decides to do a runner from the old people's home that he's living in, and it is that, but it's also a lot more than that, and I'm not sure how to feel about it. I like it, I really like it actually, but it's just so unique compared to anything else that I've read this year. The story centres around Alan Carlson and opens in 2005 on his 100th birthday. The old people's home that he's living in is about to celebrate that birthday, but Alan wants none of it, so he climbs out of the window and ends up going on what has been a mad adventure so far. Alan is a simple Swedish man with a love of vodka, and I mean he really, really loves vodka. The book is split between the past and the present, so we're following him on this adventure, but we're also learning about his past through these chapters that covers big chunks of his life from 1905 onwards. Alan has seen and done a lot of things as you would expect from someone that is 100 years old. His past is this Forrest Gump-esque storyline where he travels across the world and the events of the 20th century unfold around him. The thing is, he's not an active traveller, he's not an adventurer, he just keeps stumbling headfirst into these world events. The First World War, the Second World War, and a few other things that honestly I don't really want to mention because it's so much fun to find out as you're reading. The thing is, he's apolitical. He just doesn't care, he has no opinion whatsoever. His stance on life is that things are what they are and whatever will be will be. But he keeps getting dragged into these intensely political situations, keeps meeting people that have agendas that he gets dragged into. I'm only a few hours in, and so far, Alan has accidentally stumbled into some major world events that he's unwittingly influenced. He reacts to these situations in such a chilled out, understated manner. Most of the time, he's just looking for where he can get his next bottle of vodka, and it's hilarious to listen to, if not just slightly strange in a great way. As for the adventure that is going on in the present, it's equally as strange as his past, and honestly has gone in some totally unexpected directions so far. I'm not particularly sure what I want to say, because part of the charm of this book is just going along for the ride and seeing the mad situations that he gets into, and they honestly are mad. He's bumped into and collected a number of different people that are quickly becoming his friends, and their interactions are so much fun. You never really know what they're going to say to each other and what's going to happen, and honestly, throughout the whole book, I've just sat there, and there's been so many times that I've said to my partner, what the hell is going on here? Because it just never ends up going where you think that it's going to go. It's got this weirdly charming, whimsical writing style that is kind of like listening to a Roald Dahl-esque children's story, but written for adults. There's been all these asides where we get to see what different characters are thinking, including animals, which I find endlessly entertaining, to be honest. At first it was quite jarring. It's not written like anything that I've read before, and there's quite a lot of repetition. Early on, there's two characters that are introduced that the author just refers to as the little man and the young man, because they have no names, and the little man and the young man get said quite a lot. It took me a little while to get used to the way that the author writes, but now that I am used to it, I'm actually quite enjoying it. The story has a sense of constant movement so far. Different characters get moved in and out in these little asides, and we get to learn about their backgrounds. They all have unique stories, as most people do, and we learn about them in quite a lot of detail. I don't really know how this is going. I wish I could do a better job of articulating my thoughts on this so far, but I'm kind of hesitant to say certain things because one of the things that has made this so much fun is not knowing and going into this just having no idea what was going to happen. And if I had anticipated the way things were going to go, they wouldn't have had anywhere near as much impact and wouldn't have been anywhere near as entertaining. I have a bit of a soft spot for simple, understated characters, especially when they're contrasted with these dramatic events that they can react to in ways that other characters wouldn't, and so I'm actually quite liking Alan. It's so charming that he's led this life where he's been on so many adventures that he's just not content to sit in the old people's home where they won't even let him drink his vodka. They keep confiscating his bottles, which I don't understand because he's not a violent man. He's 100 years old. If he wants to drink some vodka, let him drink some vodka. But he's not content with the life that he's living, so he just decides to just bugger off and go on some more adventures, and I love that. I think it's great. My only issue that I have so far is that there's 6.5 hours left, and I don't particularly know where it's going to go. So much has happened that it feels like it could end soon, but there's so much left. I'm intrigued to find out what happens next, but I'm worried that it's going to feel like it's getting dragged on too far. I will say that some of the parts in the chapters that cover Alan's past are slightly less interesting because they do explain these political situations, and sometimes they do take a little bit too long to do so, but they're also contrasted with Alan's understated reaction to what is happening, so it's not a massive complaint. Right, so I'm going to wrap up for now, and then I'll go and read some more later once I get back from a meal, and I'll check in with you once I've read some more. Alright, I'm back, although I guess from your point of view I didn't actually go anywhere, but past me was talking to you on Monday and it's now Wednesday. I actually had a really good day on Monday. I ate so much that I thought I was going to burst, to be honest. I intended to read a little bit more when I got back from the pub, but it didn't end up happening. I ate so much that when I got home, all I wanted to do was just sleep, so I ended up having a bit of a lazy evening. At this point, I've now finished the book entirely. I did intend to document my journey through the book a little bit better than I have. I thought that it would take me more than 2 sittings, but I ended up spending all day yesterday listening because, frankly, I didn't want to dedicate another day. I ended up having such mixed feelings on this book. Now, I don't know whether this is going to make sense at all, but you know when you meet someone, maybe a friend of a friend, and at first, you quite like them. They're a bit quirky and entertaining, but then, as you spend more time with them, they're a bit much. They're a little bit exhausting. And then when the day's over, you're glad that you just get to go home and you don't have to spend any more time with them. That's how I felt about this book. On Monday I said that I was concerned that there was 6.5 hours left because things were already at a point where it felt like they could start wrapping up and it was sort of in danger of dragging on a little bit. Well, that concern was valid because it did. In the end, the story just outstayed its welcome. All of the things that I initially liked ended up getting old. The jokes I found funny were hammered home and done over and over again. Although I initially found them quite charming, the tangents and asides that the author went on just ended up feeling a bit indulgent. They felt like they were bogging the story down and I was just begging him to just get to the point. For example, later on, there's a character that's become religious because he needed to read the Bible. So we go on a tangent to explain why he read the Bible, and there was a misprint. So then we go on a tangent to explain why the misprint was in the Bible. And it takes so long to get to the punchline that it doesn't feel like it was worth it. Unfortunately, that sort of thing happens a lot, and for me it really did hurt the momentum of the story. The worst thing is that I think it was intentional. Towards the end, there's a scene or a chapter where the characters involved are telling the story to somebody else, and they're explaining it in such a way that they're going off on all these tangents, and the character that they're explaining the story to is getting frustrated. He is getting like, just get to the point, and it's making him so mad, and it sort of proved to me that it was done on purpose. The thing is, in that chapter, one of the people telling the story is the 100-year-old man. And if Alan had been the narrator of the book, then it would have made sense to go off on all these tangents, but he wasn't. It was more of an omniscient narrator, and so I don't really know whether it worked as it was intended. Another problem was that in the beginning, it was split quite evenly between Alan's past and present, but it got to a point where the adventure in the present, which was the part I was enjoying more, felt like it was over, and to drag it out, we started spending more time in Alan's past, which was interesting, but those chapters felt like they took forever, and it started to feel tedious. Now here's the thing, I'm not saying that it was objectively bad. In fact, I think that certain people would get such a kick out of this story. If you're the sort of person that knows a lot about the global politics and current affairs of the 20th century, you would get so much more out of this than I did. In all honesty, I just don't know that much about the finer details of the 20th century. And I'm not that interested in the struggle between capitalism, fascism and communism, and there's a lot of that, because Alan, with his apolitical nature, stumbles around accidentally flip-flopping his allegiances and bumps into multiple political figures and world leaders. I feel like there's just probably a lot of references that went right over my head. It started to feel unbelievable, where in the beginning I found it quite funny that Alan was accidentally influencing these massive global events. It happened so much that in the end it just felt like Alan was accidentally the most important man in the world, and that kind of sounds like it should be funny, but it just started to be Alan influenced this, Alan influenced that. If something happened in the mid to late 1900s, Alan probably made it happen, and the joke just started to get old after a while. The characters didn't have as much depth as I would have liked, if I'm honest. Most of them have one or two traits that get used over and over again. There's one character that's simply called the Beauty, and her entire gimmick is she likes to swear. All the characters are so shocked that there's a beautiful woman that has a potty mouth. And it was funny at first, but after the 50th or 60th time, it felt played out. That can be said for most of the characters, and I don't want to get into what the rest of the characters' traits are, because it's kind of fun to find out as you go through the story, but even Alan himself developed to a certain point but didn't go any further. By the end of the story I was like, yeah, I get it, he likes vodka and he always speaks his mind and doesn't realise what trouble that gets him into. There's also the audiobook narrator, Peter Kenny, who I actually quite liked, but I don't feel was a good choice, if that makes sense. This is a translated work, and I don't understand why they chose an English guy to be the narrator when it's set in Sweden and quite a lot of the characters are Swedish, but Peter Kenny does English accents for them. There was one character that had a Birmingham accent and I just didn't understand it. Why not get an English speaking Swedish narrator? To be honest, I find it a little bit disappointing that I've had to come in here and record my thoughts and they've come across as so negative and critical, because I actually think there's a lot to like about this book, and I'm sure you could tell that at the beginning of this video I thought that this had a lot of promise. I enjoyed the start a lot, which is unusual for me because it usually takes me a few chapters to settle into a book. I quite often find the beginning boring, but this one drew me in right away and I was so intrigued, but it just went on too long. It was dragged out and I was just sick of it by the end. I was begging for it to be over. If this had been a 5, maybe 6 hour book, that would have been perfect. Another hour on top of what I'd already read on Monday to wrap things up would have made this an enjoyable experience rather than one that I found a little bit exhausting. It really is just personal taste though. Despite my feelings, I would still recommend this book. In fact, I'd highly recommend it. I think certain people would love it. It was so much more than I thought it was going to be. I was expecting a simple story about an old man looking back over his life. I thought it was going to have some emotional, heartfelt moments, but for the most part it was going to be simple. It wasn't. It was adventurous and humorous and quirky, but I just got a little bit tired of it. But I don't think other people would. So, yeah, it's a weird mixture of feelings. My question for today is this: is there a story that you enjoyed at first, but eventually found that it outstayed its welcome? I hope that you've enjoyed today's review. If you have, share a bottle of vodka with the like button, and then say hi in the comments section and we can have a chat. The link to my Twitter is in the description, and subscribing will make sure that you never miss another review. Thanks so much for spending time with me today, guys. Until next time, take care. For now, I'm off, and you should have a good one.